everyone. It's a great turnout tonight, and I've heard from several people who wanted to be here but couldn't be. And we will have it, we're recording it, and it will be up a video up on our website within the next week or two. So if anybody wants to pass it on to friends, they can send them the link. So tonight's program is a video tour of the Mouse Cemetery. Well, a lot of you apparently are pretty familiar with that. You've been there or been near it. And we really, really wanted to do a program at the cemetery, but it's really impossible. There's no place for that many people to park. The ground is not very level for most of us who need a little flat land to walk on. So we're trying to do the next best thing. Barb Rowe has pulled together a lot of research on some of the people who are buried there and pictures. Greg Johnson, our tech guy, has put together the slides that you'll see. And we start out with a video that was done a few years ago by Oscar Osbo, who many of you know. He's done a lot of videos for us in the past. So that kind of gets you an introduction to it, and then Barb and I will talk a little bit about some of the specific people in there. And we can't touch on everybody, but at least we'll catch a few. So this is a picture of the entrance to the cemetery. It's a very kind of quiet, idyllic place, but it's a little difficult to get around in. A lot of very old graves in there in various sorts of conditions. But we'll start. There we go. We'll walk in through the gates here and take a look at this video.
Historical White Lake, Mouth Cemetery, a place of reverence and respect. An article by Barbara Brow, White Lake Area Historical Society. The oldest known cemetery in the area is the Mouse Cemetery in White River Township, which was established sometime between the mid-1830s and 1850. No one knows for sure when the first person was buried there. There are no records for when the cemetery started. There are no records for the White River Township from 1848 to 1859 to help find information about the cemetery. Located on a lofty, hilly perch, not far from the shores of Lake Michigan, at the end of the dirt road, which winds through a dense wooded area, is where you will find this historic cemetery. Measuring about 3 acres in size, it contains approximately 300 graves, of which about half of them date to the 19th century. The earliest mention of the graves at this location was in a deed Ansel Hobart made to William M. Ferry on November 15, 1849. Ample mentions 2 acres that, quote, will include the graves now on said lot, and which the parties of the first part hereby with the said party of the second part to convey to some proper municipal corporation capable of holding the same for a burying ground, unquote. The same description was again described in a deed when William Ferry sold the land to Newell Avery in 1864. In the early days, it is told that 39 lives were lost when an epidemic swept through a passenger ship that was crossing Lake Michigan. They buried those who died in the cemetery with just wooden crosses to mark their graves, which have all since deteriorated. The oldest marked grave is that of Sarah Jane Beatrice, wife of Charles Beatrice, who died the 28th of February 1851 at the age of 29 years. The oldest known settler buried there is Quismaquah, an Ottawa woman who was born in an Indian settlement on the Grand River and came to the White Lake area as a young girl. It is believed that she was born in 1787 and she died on the 12th of December 1897 at the age of 110 years. She had married an Ottawa Indian who went by the surname of Anderson. Another old-timer is Captain William Robinson III, the first and longest-serving keeper of the White River Light Station. Construction on the lighthouse finally began in 1875, and Captain Robinson even helped with some of the masonry work on the lighthouse itself, since it was a home that he and his family would be living in. He died the 2nd of April, 1919, at the age of 87 years after serving as lightkeeper for over 47 years.
Our original lightkeeper came from England, jolly old England. His name was Captain William Robinson. In his 30s, he and his wife Sarah Cooper Robinson came over, got passage to this area. Did not come to answer an ad for lightkeeper. He actually came because he wanted to get into the ship's chandler's business, which is outfitting ships with the metal anchor chains and such. When he got here, he noticed that the ship's captains were all about the old river entrance into the area. And our namesake, which is the White River Light Station, plays an important role in the history here, because without it, they would not be able to do the lumbering, and that's what this area was known for, was the lumbering operation. We were once known as the lumber queen or capital of the world, so it had worldwide status.
Long before White River Township existed, there was a large Native American village located near the mouth of the White River. Information shows that a great massacre occurred between the tribes on the north shore of White Lake in the mid-1600s. Many of those who died were buried there in unmarked graves. With the establishment of a post office in 1854, the area became a thriving lumber town with a mill located at the bottom of the hill. Lumbermen, fishermen, and sailors were probably also buried there. In 1859, all of the township records were reportedly burned by the city officials after it was found to be impossible to reconcile the financial records. Along with those records, the burial records were also destroyed. In 1877, the White House and barn to the south of the cemetery were owned by William A. Rowe. He was the supervisor of White River Township from 1875 until his death in 1901 and is buried in the cemetery. The residence and barn were both built prior to 1876. The barn, which has since been torn down, was a depot stop for horses and wagons passing through. The south room of the residence was used as a post office for the village at the mouth. For a number of years, this residence was also a 4-bedroom boarding house. A school was located on the hill in front of the house at that time. The Hamilton family have owned the property since 1910. Admittedly, the cemetery does not have a well-manicured grounds with gravestones all in neat rows that one would find in the cities. But a wrought iron and intricately designed wire fence was installed in 1911 and was the only thing that outlined the cemetery for many years. The fence was the result of an enterprise and patriotism of the White River Ladies Aid Society. The society undertook the task of raising funds for the cemetery fence with entertainments, socials, and donations, and accumulated the amount needed, $325. The old undescribed fence was then sold to N.W. Jackson for $12.75. In 1954, the White River Township Board voted to get a deed and description for Mouth Cemetery. In 1986, the Mouth Cemetery Preservation Committee was established, and funds were raised for a new wrought iron fence which was installed in May 1987. Because of its somewhat neglected appearance up to that time, it seemed to become a hangout spot for drinking and mischief. In 1987, after just a few short weeks of the installation and dedication of the new fence, vandals uprooted several gravestones while others were broken off their bases. Almost 100 decorative spears attached to the top of the railing were broken off, and a vehicle was driven into the newly installed wrought iron fence. Fortunately, the vandals, 2 young adults and a youth, were quickly apprehended. In 1989, the Mouth Cemetery, a place of reverence and respect, was placed on the State Register of Historic Sites.
So that gives you a good picture of the history of the cemetery. Quick overview. It's a pretty special place around here for a lot of people and for the community. So right now we're going to move into just talking about a few of the people who are buried there and their lives. The Johnson Agard family is among those there. It's interesting to look at the design on this gravestone. There's a harp surrounded with oak leaves. The harp symbolizes hope, and the leaves equal faith, virtue, or endurance. Johnson Agard was just 23 years old when he died on December 30th, 1903. The circumstances of his death are unknown, as are which Agard family he belonged to. So somebody could do some research on that sometime and figure out who he was. The next one is familiar from the video. Quismo Qua Anderson. She was a Native American, and let me just read you the obituary from the Whitehall Forum of 1897 about her death. It says, Mrs. Anderson, probably the oldest resident in Michigan, died Sunday morning at the extreme old age of 110 years. The deceased was the daughter of Osbo, one of the famous chiefs of the Ottawas, and was born on the Grand River near the present site of Grand Rapids in 1787. And I don't know how much you know about Michigan and Grand Rapids area in 1787, but there was nobody there but the natives, and it was pretty sparsely settled then too. When she was 18 years old, she married Blue Eye, whose English name was Anderson. So that's how she got the English-sounding name. 7 children were born to them, 3 of whom survive her. 2 sons, Peter and Jacob, and a daughter, Mrs. Armstrong, Lydia, who is nearly 70 years of age, and with whom she had made her home for the last 40 years in White River. She was a great-great-grandmother, Mrs. Captain Robinson being one of her granddaughters, so another familiar name. The deceased preserved her faculties well till the last, although she had been quite deaf for the last 8 or 10 years. She possessed a wonderful memory and could relate with great distinctness many interesting incidents of wild life in Michigan when it was for the most part an unbroken wilderness, and battles between Indian tribes and the whites. The funeral was held on Wednesday, December 15th at the residence of Mrs. Armstrong in White River. So it's amazing that we have this much information on her. So she was a pretty remarkable woman. The next one is the grave of her daughter, Lydia, whose name was Chicago, which almost sounds like Chicago. I don't know. And she was born in 1829, lived until 1917. She was born in Grand Haven, the daughter of Chief Blue Eyes Anderson and Quismo Qua. Around 1863, she married George A. Armstrong, and they had 3 children, George, William, and Thomas. Her husband served in the rebellion. He died in 1895. Lydia died at the home of her son Thomas, where the funeral was also held. She and her husband George are both buried in Mouth Cemetery. Next person is Elizabeth Betsy Hadley Sumner Brockway Clough. She had an interesting history. She was born in New London in New Hampshire in 1782 to Private Jacob Hadley and Elizabeth Putnam Hadley. She first married Daniel Sumner in Hyde Park, Vermont in 1801. They had 8 children: Putnam, Sarah, Clarissa, Daniel, Mary, Samantha, Martha, and John. John was born in 1810. Her husband died that same year, leaving her with 8 children. In 1812, she then married William Calkins Brockway. She married him in Morristown, Vermont. They also had 8 children. Reverend William, Philip, Daniel, Betsy, Juliet, Jane, Lucy, and Alonzo. They're finding enough names for all these kids. Alonzo was born in 1824. Her husband died in 1825, leaving her now with 16 children. So her third and final husband was Stephen Clough. We don't know their marriage date. The 1850 census shows Stephen, age 68, and his wife Betsy, age 68, living with a 10-year-old girl named Betsy in Hyde Park, Vermont. Don't know what relative that was, granddaughter, great-granddaughter, niece. It doesn't really say in the census. The 1870 census, when Betsy was close to 90 years old, showed her as living with her son Putnam, his wife Callista, and their family. Her grave site is identified by a DAR marker, the Daughters of the American Revolution, so somehow she's descended from an American Revolution veteran. And she's buried next to her grandson Julius, who was the son of Putnam Sumner. So 16 children, 3 husbands, and she lived a long time. Next is the Cushway family. And this is another stone with decorations that give a message. This is decorated with clasped hands, which can indicate the relationship between the person who passed and the loved one left behind, of a farewell or last goodbye. It can also illustrate unity in life and death or a partnership such as a man and wife. Esther Louise V. Storms was born in New York in 1835. She was married to Charles P. Cushway about 1855. He was a fisherman before taking work as a sawyer in the Held and Company mill, so that would be here at White Lake. In 1860, they were living in White River with 3 of their children, Matilda, age 5, Esther, age 4, and Lucy, age 1. By 1870, they had 3 more children, Charles, Emma, and John. Esther died in 1880. The cause of death was listed as neuralgia of the stomach, whatever that is. Next is the G family. That's a familiar name around here. So this is the gravestone for Lydia and Jacob G. It says, over time, old markers often become broken and the information is hard to read. This appears to be the case with this replacement stone, which was set by the G descendants in 2013. It is possible that Lydia's original marker may have once been decorated with a weeping willow, which you can see on that gravestone, and Jacob's had a hand with a finger pointing up. So these decorations were recreated and added to the new stone. The drooping branches of the weeping willow symbolize the drooping spirits and hearts of those who have lost their beloved family member. The weeping willow was very popular on gravestones at the end of the 1700s and early 1800s. The finger pointing upwards symbolizes the pathway to heaven, or the deceased found his heavenly reward. Information indicates that Jacob B.G. was born in Virgil, Cortland, New York. He married Lydia Ballou in 1826. They had 9 children during their marriage. She died in 1867. Jacob then married Adelise Merton Chapin in Dalton in 1868. She died in 1929 and is buried in Oatka Cemetery in Scottsville, New York. A very brief death notice about Jacob G. stated that he was the grandfather of J.J.G., and he died at his home in Whitehall. He was an old resident who had settled here in 1853 and was a hardware dealer. And some of us knew Everett G., who was the funeral director for a long time here, pretty well known around the area. And I think this is where I turn it over to Barb to finish up these things.
One of the saddest funerals in many years was held on Tuesday, November 4th, 1919, at the home of Mr. and Mrs. Robert Mahoney. Mrs. Mahoney was the sister of the deceased Herman Lekas. Mr. and Mrs. Lekas were returning from a 2-week trip to the home of her parents in Port Washington, Wisconsin, where they went to celebrate their first wedding anniversary. They were homeward bound on the SS City of Muskegon on October 28, 1919. Shortly after 4 a.m., just after she was entering the Muskegon harbor, the boat crashed against the piers and was pounded to pieces by the fury of the awful storm. Like many others on the vessel, they were probably trapped in their staterooms and could not escape until the waves broke the upper portion of the craft to pieces. The body of Mrs. Lekas was found in the morning of the wreck, but her husband was not discovered until Saturday, November 1st. Herman Lekas was born to the Lekas homestead in White River on July 17, 1891, was the only son of 8 children. He had served at the Coast Guard station for several years, but during the past summer was employed at Sylvan Beach. He was 28 years old. Mrs. Lekas was the former Bertha Beer, who was born in Port Washington, Wisconsin, on the 7th of January, 1895. They had been married in Port Washington on the 15th of October, 1918. She was just 24 years old. Probably the most well-known of the residents in Mouth Cemetery is Captain William Robinson, and the first lighthouse keeper from May of 1876 until March of 1919. He was instrumental in the commissioning and construction of the lighthouse. He served as lighthouse keeper for 47 years, making him one of Michigan's oldest lighthouse keepers. He was born in Tynesmouth, England, in September of 1831. He married Sarah Cooper in 1852. She was born in Newcastle, England. Captain Robinson and his wife and 6 of their children came from England to the United States around 1867. The children were Mary Ann, Jane, Captain Thomas, Captain Williamson, Sarah, and Anna. Children who were born after they reached Michigan include Elizabeth, George, Ellen, and Annabelle. I recently learned, everybody talks about the 13 children that lived in the lighthouse, and I recently learned that there were actually 9 that lived in the lighthouse. 9 of the 13 lived in the lighthouse. The rest of them had married and started homes of their own. That kind of relieved me because I couldn't imagine how 13 people and a mom and dad could live in the lighthouse. Captain Thomas Robinson was hired to assist his father in the lighthouse station from 1877 to 1882 before serving in Manistee and Muskegon. He also served with the lighthouse service. He served with the lighthouse service until 1928. Captain Williamson Robinson died in April 1919. His grandson, William E. Bush, took over the service there from 1911 until 1942. For 67 years, from the time the lighthouse was completed in 1875 until Mr. Bush's retirement, the White River Lighthouse was kept by members of the same family. This is probably one of the most unique headstones to be found in a historic cemetery. It belongs to Norman and Leon Sargent, which has their life or death masks of their face. Norman Sargent was born in Muskegon in April 1930 to George and Mabel Sargent. He purchased property in White Lake in 1957, where he would live for the rest of his life. He married Lenore Thompson in 1978. He and Lenore both were both accredited stockbrokers and established the Sargent Brokerage in Whitehall, maintaining the business until retirement. Lenora was the elder daughter of Stuart and Hazel Calkins, who was born April 1938 in Muskegon. She graduated from Muskegon High School and Hackley School of Nursing. She was active in community serving as president of the Miss White Lake pageant and was a member of the American Legion Auxiliary. While their White Lake residence would always be called home, after retiring in 1992, Norman and Leona enjoyed winters in Palm Desert, California. It doesn't appear, even though the name is Sargent, doesn't appear that they are in any relation to the early sergeants of the White Lake area. John Stanford Turns was born in Durham, England in October 1828. He sailed the salt water from the early age of 14 to 21. In May 1848, he married Jane Robinson, sister of Captain Robinson of Tynemouth, England. According to his obituary, they had 9 children, although I can only find 8 listed. Not going to mention them here. Turns, his wife, and infant daughter came to the United States in 1852, settled in New York, where their second daughter was born. They moved to Illinois before they made their way to White Lake area and settled in Duck Lake around 1854. Turns was employed by Charles Mears at Duck Lake and at Mears in Oceana County for many years. In 1860 and 1870, they were living in White River. His occupation was a lumberman and head sawyer for a lumber company that was not listed, not sure which one. Turns' wife, Jane, died in January of 1880. By the 1880 census, John Turns was living with his married daughter, Martha Leakus, and her family in Fruitland Township. In 1990, he was living with his son, John, and wife, Jenny. Turns died at the home of his son, Robert, in February 1908. The funeral was held from the son's home in Michelinda on February 13th. On account of the softening of ice, it was not thought advisable to cross White Lake, so the procession had to come through Montague to the mouth, making it nearly a 14-mile trek, or 10 miles further than if the lake could have been crossed. 4 members of the Whalen family died between December 1875 and June of 1876. 3 children and their father. Other than their names in the census on the gravestones, no one would know they existed. Anastasia died in 1875 at the age of 6 years and 11 months, 15 days. She shares a gravestone with her brother Richard, who died January 1876 at the age of 5 years, 9 months, 14 days. The father, Richard, who was listed as a fisherman, died next in March of 1876. He was 41 years old. He was followed by a daughter, Joanna, who died in June of 1876. She was just 3 years old. Richard's wife, Ellen, continued to live in the area. At one time, she operated a boarding house in Montague and was living with her son, Bartholomew. According to her death certificate, she was born in Ireland, was married at 25 years old, and had 8 children, with only Bartholomew remaining at the time of her death. She died in March of 1898 from heart failure and pneumonia at the age of 62. She is buried on March 8, 1898 in a Montague cemetery, probably the mouth, but we don't know for sure. There's no gravestone for her. Just outside of the cemetery fence is a grave site that belongs to members of the Hamilton family, and it's technically located on Hamilton property. At one time, one of the graves was inside the cemetery. All of the information that I have here comes from Find a Grave, which they have even though they're outside of the cemetery, they've included them in their records. Baker Aaron Hamilton and his wife Edna Isabel Schell are originally from the Chicago area. Dr. Hamilton was a dentist, summer home in the White Lake area around 1910. They were married in 1913 in Fond du Lac, Wisconsin, and had 4 sons. Dr. Baker, Dr. Traver, Wilson, and Dr. Sheldon. Dr. Baker M. Hamilton was born in Illinois in 1914. He married an Australian-born Thelma Pope Parks, and they had 3 children, Robert, Dwight, and Jacqueline. Jacqueline is the daughter of Baker and Hope Hamilton, buried in the family plot. Dr. Sheldon Hamilton was born in Highland Park in 1926. He married Nancy Nelson, and they had 2 daughters, Catherine and Janice. Sheldon died in 2022. His wife Nancy had died in 2012. Catherine is the daughter of Dr. Sheldon and Nancy Hamilton. Traver Hamilton was born in 1919 in Highland Park and married Margaret Meservey. They had 2 sons, Wayne and Steve. Dr. Hamilton was an oral surgeon in the U.S. Navy, retiring the rank of captain in 1978. He served in World War II, the Korean conflict, and the Vietnam conflict. Traver died in Muskegon in 1985. His wife Peg died in Golden, Colorado in 2001. Both of them are buried in Oak Grove Cemetery. The last of the Hamilton sons, Wilson Lewis Hamilton, was born in 1924 in Highland Park. He married Molly Frances Dangerfield in 1948 in Norfolk, Virginia. They had a daughter, Deborah, and a son, Kenneth. Molly died in 1999. Wilson died in 2015 in Deerfield, Illinois, and is buried in the Hamilton plot just outside of Mouth. I was there a week ago and I couldn't see where their graves were, but that doesn't mean they're not there. Around 2007, members of the Muskegon County Genealogical Society undertook the project of visiting each of the cemeteries in Muskegon County to photograph the graves that they found there. Then they went on to a website called Find a Grave and posted the photos on the individual memorial pages on that site. If there is no memorial page, they would create one based on the information that they found on the gravestone or from cemetery records. Most of the historical information in this program was obtained through local newspapers, Find a Grave, and Ancestry.com.
One of the things that struck me in this is the destruction, both by time and vandals, of the gravestones and other things in the cemeteries. We were hoping here to have some descendants of the Robinsons talk a little bit tonight, because several years ago they got together and decided they needed to fix up the Robinson plot within that cemetery, and ended up spending a lot of time and money at it. We were going to have Mary McGee and her husband Kim here to talk about their project, but unfortunately Kim passed away recently, so they aren't able to be here. But they gathered the family together, realized that there was more destruction than they could handle on their own, so they created a GoFundMe account to collect enough money to repair headstones, clean headstones, clear out trees, and add some fencing, some of those other things. That's a pretty big project, and there's a lot more left out at the Mouth Cemetery that needs to be done. But some of those problems exist in any cemetery that has older grave sites. over time, headstones fall down, they get damaged by trees falling on them, they have lichen and other things grow on them, so you can't read them anymore. And so one of the things I've been thinking about is what we can do about it if we have a family plot or see something that needs something done. One of our board members, Tom Eitenaier, has been doing projects cleaning headstones in local cemeteries, and he asked me if he could do that with some of my family in both the Whitehall and Montague cemeteries. And I just want to take a minute and show you what one person can do in a very short amount of time. This is the headstone of my great-great-grandfather's brother, Andrew Dalton. And that's what it looked like on about the 1st of July a year ago. Tom came and I helped him to just clean this stone, and right after the cleaning it looked like that. 2 hours later it looked like that. Now a year later it looks like that. And it takes very little time. The solution that they use is specialized, and it kills the biological things that have gotten into the stone, and over time those things have dug deeply into the stone, so the chemicals work over time. And he uses a product called D2 that's commonly used. It's safe for headstones, it doesn't work on every type of stone, so you have to know the kind of stone you're working with. The other thing that happened is in the Dalton family plot in Whitehall, there's a monument with a cross at the top of it. And we noticed when we were there doing this that the cross had fallen off and was on the ground. So I thought I'd better take that home before it got broken, lost, or who knows what. So this is what it looked like, again, a year ago, with the monument without a cross. Yesterday, Tom and I met at the cemetery, and he thought of a way to put that cross back up there. So that's what it looks like now. And that he just used Quickcrete and figured out how to do that. So just something that's easy enough to do, but if you want to do it, there are 3 things you have to be sure of. Number 1, to do it, you have to have permission of the owner of the cemetery. It may be the municipality, the city, the township, maybe a church. Sometimes they're privately owned, so you have to have their permission. And next, you have to have permission from someone in the family to clean their headstones. And third, the most important thing is don't just go out there with your Dawn dish soap or bleach, because you could do damage to the stone that's irreversible. So make sure you use the right kinds of things. There are a lot of YouTube videos out there. Some of them have the right information. Some of them are wrong and will lead you to do damage. So if you want to do it, make sure you find an expert who can show you how to go about it. So that, I think, is the end. Love to see more people involved and participating and telling us what you know about history. So thanks very much. We have refreshments over here. Jan always does a beautiful job of good My grandsons wanted to come along, and they're 9 and 11, and I said, why do you want to come along? The 9-year-old says, well, do you have refreshments? I said, yes. They said, well, then we want to come. But they decided that 2 hours here would be a little too boring and to compensate for a cookie. So anyway, enjoy.